Welcome back everyone. So today we'll discuss the chapter 1 from Al's Flyguards, Automate the Boring Stuff, second edition. Yeah, so let's start. Okay, here's some introduction. So Python programming language has a wide range of syntactical construction, library functions, interactive development environment features. Yeah, fortunately you can ignore most of that. You just need to learn enough to write some hand little programs. Yeah, so I think the essence of the book is to not dig deep too much into the documentation, but just to automate day-to-day tasks. So yeah, so this chapter has a few examples that encourage you to type into the interactive shell, also called the REPL. So REPL means read, evaluate, print loop, which lets us run Python instructions one at a time. So yeah, we'll try that as we move along. So moving on to entering expressions, we need to launch the Mu editor. So uh, I already have the Mu editor in my taskbar, so let's open that. Yeah, so while waiting, so on Mac OS, uh, I'm using Windows. So yeah, wait, let's try to open the REPL in the Mu editor. So here it will open another window. Let's put that. So let's try to enter this math expression. So 2 plus 2, let's try to mimic what's just in the book. So it outputs 4. Yeah, so here in Python, 2 plus 2 is called an expression. Yeah, so expressions are consisted of values and operators, and they evaluate to single value. So in this case 4. Another example is 2. So it's just value with no operators, and it evaluates only to itself. So let's try that. So if we type in 2, we output 2. Okay, so errors are okay. Here's some pretty nice note. Programs will crash if they contain code that the computer can't understand, which will cause Python to show an error message. So an error message won't break your computer. Yeah, so don't be afraid to make mistakes. Okay, sorry for that. So moving on. So here's the list of some operators in their precedence. So first is the exponent. It has the highest precedence, meaning it's evaluated first. Then the percentage or the modulus or remainder operator, the double forward slash or the integer division floor quotient. So the one forward slash is the division. So the difference is that it evaluates to the floor, while the normal division includes the remainder. Yeah, so the star for the multiplication, the minus sign for subtraction, and lastly the plus sign for addition. So here the order of operations is similar to that of mathematics. Yeah, so if you remember your mathematics lessons from elementary school, they also follow these precedents. So the double star operators evaluated first, the star slash double slash percentage are next, and then the plus minus are evaluated last. So you can use parentheses to override the usual precedence if you need to. White space in between the operators and values doesn't matter for Python. Yeah, so even if you had spaces, for example, your 3 space star space 5, but a single space is convention. So let's try all of these expressions one by one. Yeah, sorry, I had to pause again. So let's try this one by one, the expressions. So for example, 2 plus 3 times 6 evaluates to 20. So again, the precedence is the multiplication first before the addition. So 6 times 3 is 18 plus 2 is 20. So if we put a parenthesis, for example, then it becomes 30. So the parenthesis is first evaluated now before the multiplication. So 5, then 630. So let's try this one. Very large number. I'll just copy. Yeah, here. Then the exponent 256. 93 over 7. The normal division, it has the decimal places. Then if we have the double division, floor division, or integer division, so we get the floor, the closest integer, so 3. Then the modulo, so the remainder, so is 2. Then to test the white space, so the spaces doesn't matter. And then the uh, parenthesis, so we can define the precedence or override the usual precedence. So we're at 16. So I think if you have parenthesis for the whole expression, so it will evaluate first all the parentheses. So this one gets to 4, then this one gets to 8, then this one gets to 2. So you have 4, 8, 2. Then now you have 8 over 2 here, so it becomes 4. Yeah, and then you now multiply this by 4, so you get 16. But since we use normal division, we get the output which has decimal place. So let's try maybe something like this. Yeah. And if we try the integer one, yeah, cool. Yeah, so that's how I just explained how the expression was evaluated down to the final value. So we first evaluate all the parentheses, and then once all the parentheses are gone, we follow the usual precedence of the operators. Yeah, okay, let's move on. So for example, we have 5 plus only, 5 plus, so it will throw a syntax error because there's a missing value in the expression. Or for example, we try this next code. Yeah, because there are two simultaneous operators, so I think that's what's causing the invalid syntax. Yeah, okay, so moving on. Integer, floating point, and string data type. So expressions are just values combined with operators, and they evaluate down to a single value. A data type is a category for values, and every value belongs to one data type. So here are the common data types: the integers, so floating point numbers, those with decimal places, and strings. Then note, for example, note that even though the value ported as an integer, 42.0 would be a floating point number. Yeah. So we had the negative 0 and positive integers, negative 0 and positive floating point, and then our racial strings. Python programs can also have text values called strings. Yeah, that's earlier. So if you ever see the error message syntax error EOL while scanning string, you probably forgot the final single quote. So let's try this one if it will throw the same error. Yeah, so it fails to identify the partner quote. So that's what the error means. Okay, so I think we had 3 data types to remember as we move along. Yeah. So next, string concatenation. So in Python we can concatenate strings. So when we use the plus operator on two strings, it joins the string as the string concatenation operator. So let's try this one. So Alice plus Bob. So Alice Bob. So when we add two strings, concatenate. So the expression evaluates down to a single new string value. However, if you try to use the plus operator on string and integer, Python will not know how to handle this and it will spray an error message. So let's try that as well. So yeah, so can only concatenate string, not into string. Yeah, so Python has problem concatenating this one. So most probably we need to convert this one to a string as well to concatenate it. So yeah, so code will have to explicitly convert the integer to a string because Python cannot do this automatically. So I think in the future lessons we will learn how to convert. We have functions to do that. Next is the multiplication operator. The star multiplies two integers or floating point values, but when the star operator is used on one string value and one integer value, it becomes string replication. Yeah, so we can replicate a string certain times here. So we put Alice times 5. Yeah, so string replication is a useful trick, but it's not used as often as string concatenation. The star operator can be used with only two numeric values, or one string value and one integer value for string replication. Otherwise, Python will display an error message. So if we try to string replicate two strings, this does not make sense at all. Yeah. So when you also try we try to use floating point instead of the usual integer. Yeah, so it throws an error. So we can do string replication by using one string and one integer value, but not one string to another or one string to one floating point. Yeah, so you can multiply two words, yeah, and start to replicate an arbitrary string a fractional number of times. Yeah. Next is storing variable value. So a variable is like a box in the computer memory. We can store single value. So if you want to use the result of an evaluated expression later in your program, you can save it inside the variable. So assignment statement. So store values in variables with an assignment statement. An assignment statement consists of a variable name, an equal sign, and the value to be stored. If you enter the assignment statement spam equals 42, then a variable name spam will have the integer value of 42. So think of the spam as a box and a value inside of it. So let's try to replicate this item. So spam equals 40, then the 40 value is stored already in spam variable. So when we enter spam, we get 40. So we try to x equals 2, then we add spam and x 42. So when we add two variables, their values are added when we call them, not necessarily the variable name itself. So you can do that multiple times. Spam, yeah, 82, and then we can reassign the value. So when you enter spam, so spam now 42. So the initial value was 40, then we add 2, so the new value of spam is 42. So a variable is initialized the first time a value is stored in it. After that, you can use it in expression with other variables and values. Okay, so that's what this examples does. Then when a variable is assigned a new value, the old value is forgotten, which is why spam evaluated to 42 instead of 40 here in the third part. This is called overwriting the variable. So let's try to do that. So we first assign hello, then we overwrite and assign goodbye, then spams goodbye. Yeah. So here's like a sample representation. So initially we assign in the box the value hello, then we overwrite, then the hello gets replaced by the goodbye, or forgotten essentially. So variable names. A good variable name describes the data it contains. Yeah, so I think yeah, so don't name your variables that is not representative of what it contains. So though you can name your variables almost anything, Python does have some naming restrictions. So here's some examples. It can only be one word with no spaces. It can only use only letters, numbers, and the underscore character. It can't begin with a number. So here's some example valid names. Current balance, account, can't begin with a number, capital letters, or the hello world. Yeah. Here's some sample of allowed and not allowed. I think it's pretty straightforward. Variable names are case sensitive, meaning that spam, and spam are four different variables. Though spam is a valid variable you can use in a program, it is a Python convention to start your variables with a lowercase letter. Okay, so this book uses camel case for variable names instead of underscores. That is, variable look like this instead of looking like this. So yeah, so we'll follow the camel case notation. Yeah, I think in our work, I mean in SAS, this looks much easier as well. So we name our variable something like this instead of usual underscore with very long names. So yeah, cool. Finally, we'll make some programs or your first program. So she's just explaining that for one-liner codes we use the REPL or the interactive shell. For multiple instruction or programs, we need to use the file editor. So we'll write a new file. I think we already have one here, the untitled. Yeah, so yeah, that. Okay, so let's try to write this code. So these programs, so I guess this hashtag is for comment and asks for my name. So print hello world, print what is your name, my name equals input, print it is good to meet you, plus my name. Yeah, so I think we're doing string concatenation here. Then print the length of your name is, and print len my name, then print what is your age, ask for their age, my age equals input, then print you will be plus string in my age plus 1 plus in a year. Yeah, okay, so let's try to save that. Chapter 1. So let's save that as hello.py, and then we press F5 to run the code. So there's some output. So let's try to put John. It's good to meet you, John. The length of your name is 4. What is your age? 27. Will be 29. Yeah, so I think that's it. It's a program. So when there are no more lines of code to execute, the Python program terminates. That is, it stops running. You can close the file editor by clicking the X at the top of the window. Yeah, X here. Then if you want to reopen, you can use the open, or I think a load. Yeah, so then yeah, we can tell 27. Yeah, can read the execution of a program using the Python tutor visualization. There's no Python tutor here. But anyways, let's try to check what this does. I see. I think we do not need this for now. Then finally, dissecting our program. So comment, so the first line was a comment, so Python ignores the comment, so it may be used for readability, I guess, or what function this code block, the following code block looks like. Then the print function displays the string values inside its parentheses. Okay, So it will print out this string hello world, and then what is your name. You can also use this function to put a blank line on the screen. Just call print with nothing between parentheses. I think we can try that. Yeah, so it prints blank. Okay. The input function waits for the user to type some text on the keyboard and press enter. So that's where we enter our name, John, for example. Yeah. Then printing the user's name, so call the print function, and then with the concatenation. So concatenate the "it is good to meet you" string with the input from the user. Yeah, so the length function takes the length of the string. So yeah, so we put my name to the length function as an input, and it will print the length of the string. So for example, you can try hello. Oops, sorry. Then you can try to copy this one. Yeah, 46, and length of an empty string is 0. Yeah, so I think what's notable here is that we can also pass function that returns a string in the print statement. So here we did not explicitly put the string, we put the function that returns a value and then prints it. So maybe for example, yeah, something like this, it works. So the print function allows you to pass it either integer or string values, but notice the error that shows up when you type in the following. Yeah, so let's try this one. So I guess the issue here is that we're trying to print an integer 29 with another string. We are concatenating it. So the print error is not causing the error, the print function error, but rather the contents on the print function, which is this expression. So we're trying to concatenate string with the value of an integer 29. So the string, int, and float function. If you want to concatenate an integer with a string, you'll need to get the values quote 29 quote, which is a string. So to do that, we need to call the string function. So for example, try this one. We use the string function to convert the integer 29. So it now works. Because strings 29 evaluates to quote 29 quote, the expression evaluates now to this. This is the value passed to the print function. So here's some examples for the string, int, and float. Let's try them. So strings 0 returns a quoted string, negative 3.14, int of 42, return the integer, int negative 99 will return negative 99, int 1.25 will return the integer of the floating point, 199, the integer as well, float 3.14, return the floating point, float 10, return the floating point of 10. Yeah. So string function is handy when you have an integer or float that you want to concatenate. The int function is also helpful if you have a number as a string value that you want to use in some mathematics. So for example, the input function always return a string even if the user enters a number. So let's try this one. Spam. So sorry. Spam. Let's try 101 and spam returns string 101. So if we need an integer equivalent, we need to use the int function. Then spam will be 101. Then we can use the spam variable as an integer and use in mathematical operation. Times 10 over 5. Yeah. Note that if you pass a value to int that it cannot evaluate as an integer, Python will display an error message. So let's try this int 99.99. Okay, and sample string. Yeah. So this one is invalid. So because it's a string that looks like a floating point as well. Maybe if we use the usual 99 only, yeah, we don't get an error. Also a string that's a number, you can convert that as well. So the int function is also useful if you need to round a floating point number down 7.7 int 7.7 plus 1 8. So it rounds down 7.7. You use the int and string functions in the last 3 lines of your program to get a value for the appropriate data type for the code. Yeah. So here we use the my age, so we get a string here. Then we convert the my age to integer and add 1 to get the plus 1 year value. Then we convert it back to string again so we can concatenate it. So text and number equivalence. Although the string value for a number is considered completely different value. Sorry about that. So only from integer or floating point version, an integer can be equal to a floating point value. So let's try this one, comparing 42 integer to 42 string. For false, 42 integer to 42.0 floating point, they're essentially equal, just different data type. And also we have leading zeros, potentially this is 42 as well. So Python makes this distinction because strings are text while integers and floats are both numbers. The myAge variable contains the values returned from input function. Because the input function always returns a string, you can use the int myAge code to return integer value of the string in the myAge. The integer value is then added to 1 in the expression. Yeah, so I think this is what I explained earlier with regards to how this one evaluates. Yeah. So we're in summary already. So you can compute expressions with the calculator or enter string concatenation with the word processor. You can even do string replication by copying and pasting it. but expressions and their component values, operators, variables, and function calls are the basic building blocks that make a program. Once you know how to handle these elements, you'll be able to instruct Python data to operate on large amounts of data for you. Okay, so the idea is we can do all of this manually, but when we're dealing with large sets of data, learning this one and programming this one will be much helpful to us. It'll save time and probably resources and effort to do it and program it one time and then be able to process any amount of data um, every time. So it's good to remember the different types of operators. So the plus, minus, star, divide, integer division, modulus, and the exponent, and the plus and star for string operations. And we also have three data types: the integers, floating point, numbers, and strings. So the main difference is that this one has decimal places. Yeah, with regards to integers. So introduce a few different functions as well. The print input functions to handle simple text output and input from the keyboard. The len function takes a string and evaluates to an int, and the string int and float functions will evaluate to, to the string integer or floating point number form of the value they are passed. Okay, so in the next chapter, you learn how to tell Python to make intelligent decisions, what code to skip, what code to repeat based on the values it has. This is known as flow control. It allows you to write programs to make intelligent decisions. So I think that's for the flow control chapter. Yeah, so I leave the practice questions to the user. So we have uh, answers here in the appendix. So you can probably do this on your own. I'll also try to do this on my own. Hopefully be able to answer it all correctly. So that's it for this chapter. Thanks for watching. See you in the next video. Bye.